And we're live. Greetings, friends. Hope everyone is doing well on this Monday, President's Day. For those of you who don't know already, we typically do 2 live streams, webinars a month. And we do these because it allows me the opportunity to go a little bit deeper than I normally do on my normal YouTube videos. And for people who want to know more on some of these type of subjects, it gives them an opportunity to learn more and more. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that I have been trying to personally learn more about. And that subject is how to sustainably increase productivity and profits from trees and woods on your property. And our guest today is Austin. He's a former U.S. Army Special Operations Officer. And you're also a former Operations Enduring Freedom veteran. Is that true?
I was in Afghanistan, yeah, 10th Mountain Division.
And with that, before we move on, I definitely want to say thank you very much for your service. We really
Thanks,
appreciate
Mike. I
it.
appreciate that.
And also, Austin is also a husband, a father, entrepreneur, and co-founder of LogOX. And I must say, I really enjoy the LogOX tool. I've used it here a number of times on our homestead, many times on the homestead, and it's been a great tool, and I appreciate it. And Austin, I want to welcome you to the show and thank you for being on here, willing to chat with us about forestry.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm honored. I've seen you talk at the Homesteaders of America conference that we go to, and we've had some great conversations, just sort of sidebar conversations. So it's fun to get this in front of everybody and be on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Great. I still remember that first time we met I can't remember what year it was at the Homesteaders of America, but
It was
I remember
early.
thinking
It was like the second year, first year.
I think that's right.
It was early. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
we were at the very first one. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, and don't take this the wrong way, I was like, yes, that's a modern day lumberjack right there. I like him. He's tough, strong.
Yeah.
And with that, do you consider yourself, I know you say you're not necessarily a professional, but you have done all this for years. Are you a logger, modern day lumberjack, a woodsman? Forester, how would you describe yourself?
Just a dude who enjoys heating with firewood. Yeah, no, I'm a gifted amateur in that sense. I was kind of born into it. I grew up in New Hampshire and then Vermont, and we always had a rural property. We always had fire stoves, and so some of my earliest memories being 3-4 years old, out in the woods with my mom and dad, who I later, after I left the Army, started the company with. Around the idea that my dad had for the 3-in-1 forestry multi-tool, and and that's been myself, my mom, my dad, my sister, every fall being out there splitting and harvesting firewood to keep us warm in the wintertime. And over the course of that, you learn a lot, and through trial and error, a lot of it. And so I've just continued to do that, and starting the business in the industry that I'm in, it brings back a lot of great memories. And then working with my folks, on a daily basis, in the industry that's always kind of, or in the pursuit that's always kind of brought us together of harvesting firewood, has been a lot of fun.
So it was kind of a natural fit for you with growing up, having those memories of being out there with your parents to just kind of naturally kind of identify some needs that may have been in the forestry realm and just kind of roll with it and create a business from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the best businesses are one that identify pain points that people are actually doing whatever it is have, and then finding a way to successfully address those pain points through whatever product or service or that you want to offer. The genesis of the LogOX essentially is that with myself, my sister going off to college and moving out, they needed just as much firewood to heat the same house, and then it was just my mom and my dad out there harvesting their own firewood. So. Anybody who's ever split firewood, especially with a log splitter, with a horizontal log splitter, knows that the act of repetitively bending over to pick up the rounds to put on the log splitter and feed it is murder on your back, especially your lower back, your arms. It's very labor intensive. Same thing with moving the logs kind of from one point to another point, because every time you have to stop, stoop over, bend over, pick it up, move it, and so there's a number of different times where you're bending over and picking up that round, just to get your one log worth of firewood. So what my dad was kind of playing around with for a number of years was, how do I find, we always used like a pulp hook, which anybody's familiar with that. It kind of looks like a Captain Hook, hay hook, if you will. You jam into a log and then pick it up. We played around with some wood tongs, which are kind of limited with how much they can open, and they're kind of a pain to try to get off the log after you've engaged it. And so anyway, so we had some of those tools, pickaroons. We'd use some of those, and with all those, you got to swing them around, and they really didn't do kind of what we needed to do. And so, John had the idea of using a sort of a short cant hook to be able to pick it up, because that was something that we were familiar with. We had a cant hook for just, rolling logs over, so we could buck them with a chainsaw. And so he figured out a way to engage a log round with the way the handle's configured. So every single time that you grab it, whether it's wet and slimy, whether it's got bark, whether it doesn't have bark, it's going to use the weight of the log itself to bite into the pulp of that log and engage it firmly. And then it's easy to lift the hook and release it if you want to put it onto a splitter, or if you just bring it from one spot to another to just sort of toss it. And so, through that process of trial and error, he was able to develop this tool. And he's a chemical engineer by trade. He was a pretty high-level C-suite executive type who, around the same time that I was looking to leave the military, I finished up my time in the Army, and finally be with my wife after dating long distance for 8 years, and start a family after we met in college. That I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do as I was getting out of the Army. And he was, just sort of fell victim to this big layoff that took out, the entire, division leadership overnight. It was a foreign company, leveraged buyout type thing. So anyway, he, at the same time, he was sort of trying to figure out what to do next as a 60-year-old executive, right? Not a lot of great job prospects there. I was trying to figure out a job that I could do that, would allow me to, do something I liked, first of all, but then also, be close to home, because that's essentially why I left. Left the military to finally be with my wife. So when he had this tool, I came home for the fall and just hey, help the old man with firewood, right? Like we always do. And he's like, hey, let's take the LogOX out, and we were calling it the log lugger or something at the time. I came up with LogOX, but he was like, let's take the log lugger out and and play around with it a little bit. And so anyway, at the time it was just flat steel, and so it worked basically the same way as it does now. Mm-hmm. And I was just picking up pieces like, Dad, why did we not come up with this a lot earlier, right? When I was helping you like all the time doing this, and so he just kind of smiled. But and then we realized, hey, we could add a handle to it and turn it into the can hook that we usually use. Mm-hmm. We could add a T-bar to it, which you've used, and lift it up off the ground. It provides a nice stable platform for the log when you're bucking it up. Mm-hmm. You can do it a lot faster. You're not going to run your chain in the dirt or pinch your bar. So we added those to it, and then we turned it into tubular steel. And with that, I was able to add some stuff like a pickaroon attachment, and also makes it a lot stronger too. But the diameter is still fairly small, so it's easy for people to be able to grip and hold and use, which is a lot smaller diameter than most cant hooks that are out there, which are a lot thicker, but just as strong. So anyway, so John had the good foresight to get a patent on it initially, like back in 2015, when he realized he really had something there that was unlike anything on the market. And because of its unique features, that ability to pick it up off the ground, he was able to get a patent fairly easily. And and he sought out a manufacturing partner here in the States, Swisher Manufacturing in Warrensburg, Missouri. Actually makes it for us there. Every single thing that we sell is made in the United States. And whether it's the products that we sell ourselves, or whether it's some of the other products that we've branched out and we sell for other companies like Grandberg or Sawhall, Big Tool Rack, those kind of companies. Swisher products, we sell some of their products as well, their power equipment, all made in the United States, and all of our accessories are as well. So, but yeah, so that's so then winter kind of came around, and we were just I was like, hey, Dad, let me help you with the website. Let me do some of this. Like, let's really kind of launch this company into what you see today. And about halfway through 2017. We sort of stopped looking for other jobs that we were doing previously and just started doing it full time, along with my mom, who's president of the company, and John, our CEO, and I'm the general manager of it. Working together as a team, and yeah, we've been doing it since then.
That's great.
Company. So yeah,
that's great. I love to hear about family businesses and made in America. That's mm-hmm. great. One of the things I personally enjoy about working with wood and being out there is you get a great workout. Even using the LogOX, it makes your job easier. You still get a good workout in with still working with wood, but like you said, you do not tear your back out. Definitely saves you a back saver.
Well, I mean, like what happens when you do like bad deadlifts, right? That's what a lot of
Yeah,
people out there do when you see them
yeah,
lifting up. They're doing
yeah,
improper form deadlifts over and over and over again, right? And so you ask any lifter, like, easiest way to just throw your back out, just do some bad deadlifts or
yeah,
any really exercise with bad form, right? And even people who go in with the best intentions say you're doing it with good form, you're bending it over properly, you're wasting a lot of energy doing that. I don't know about you. I'd rather spend that energy other places,
exactly right.
or get more done, right?
Yeah,
Be able to work out there longer and get more done, right? Because we're not getting any younger. I hate to tell you,
yeah,
Mike, but so
yeah.
um,
Yeah, and there's a
there are,
difference. There's a big difference between getting a good workout and being sore versus
mm,
just you've beat your body up and now you're paying for it. There's a
yeah.
two different things.
Yeah, I call it being sore in all the wrong places, right?
Yeah,
Just because you're just like, man, I didn't mean to work that, So,
yeah,
but so that was one of the big things about it is that we, first couple of years, a lot of great anecdotal evidence, people saying, hey, this really saves my back. We know it does because we use it. Now it really reduces the strain on your body, but we wanted to actually be able to quantify that, and so what we did was we linked up with Fairfield University School of Engineering in Connecticut. Had a contact there with one of the professors, his former engineering professor, who said, let's link this up to EMG technology. Have our graduate students use EMG technologies, basically sensors like electrodiode sensors that go on the main muscle groups that can measure the output of the muscle when you're actually lifting. So what they did was they compared lifting a log round onto what would be the height of a splitter with just their hands, and then they did it with the hauler. They moved from one point to another point, walking with it by their side versus carrying a log in front of them. And what they found was there was a 93% reduction in lower back strain using the LogOX hauler to be able to lift and say you're putting onto a log splitter or into a trailer or something. 93% reduction in back strain.
wow. I can believe that. I can believe
Yeah, and a 76% reduction in arm strain. Because as you know, when you're using it, you're really not really involving many of these major muscle groups. You're just kind of like swinging it on. You're just getting it up off the ground a bit and swinging it on there. And then the other thing they found, which was interesting, was an 89% reduction in quadricep strain when you're moving it, because you're not holding it in front of you. You've got it right by your side, and your spine is nice and straight. So you've got great form the entire way, and you're not stopping and stooping to pick up the log round. So they found it was a 23% reduction in time it took from going from point A to point B with one of these things. And so first of all, it really just amazed us that they were able to scientifically, empirically, quantify all that. But then also just the results. We knew it was good. We didn't realize it was quite that good. But yeah, the ergonomics of it is what kind of our whole company is based on. We can talk about the woodlots sling, our ergonomic firewood carrier, and stuff like that in a bit. But that's become our niche within a niche, right? Last year we trademarked the slogan "Harvest to Hearth." So we're American Tools for Woodsmen from Harvest to Hearth, kind of putting those two things together, our two mission statements together, if you will. And the idea being, basically like the woodlots sling, for instance, in a different university study with Fanshawe College up in Canada, they found it was a 54% reduction in lower back strain using the woodlots sling to carry firewood. Because you're not all pulled over to one side, you've got it under your arm, your spine's nice and straight. So our goal is to come up with different ergonomic solutions for the common things that we see, the problems that really aren't addressed in this industry, which is nothing. It just never changes. It's all the can hook's been the same since the 1860s when Joseph Peavy was turning logs on the Penobscot River with it, right? Like it's the same thing. So we go about changing these different things, and then working with other companies, as you can see on our website, that also have innovative American-made products and kind of creating a curated selection that we're just continuing to grow. So that when people are thinking about, hey, I want to buy something for firewood, for managing my property, everything from sort of the left limit of harvesting it, maintaining the property. We have got all sorts of different stuff for that, for maintaining trails and things like that, and tractor accessories, to bringing it indoors and to staging it by the fireplace, by the hearth, in your hearth bin, which is an adjustable hearth bin we can talk about later. That they think of us and having it be American made and really high quality is important to us.
Somewhat related to this is what are some of the mistakes that you feel, because there's a lot of people more people are getting into homesteading and getting properties, and a lot of times some of the cheaper properties are ones that have woods on them. What would you say are some of the mistakes that people make related to this forestry and dealing with woods on property?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because with the rising cost of fossil fuels, everybody's seeing with talk of the government restricting your gas powered stove and who knows what other goofy thoughts they're going to have next. Having a fireplace really is kind of a great tool if if you're concerned about self-reliance, you're concerned about what happens when the power goes out from a storm or anything else, that you still have a way to provide the essential heat for your family and yourself. Also, for cooking, for a variety of different things that human beings have used fire for millennia, since the dawn of time, right? That kind of separates us from the animals. So, it's really one of those key things. That's one of the things I really like about this industry, is it just kind of scratches that primordial itch that, it's like you're able to provide that.
Yeah.
I just think that's pretty awesome. But you want to make sure that you're doing it right. So if I was somebody who kind of two different scenarios, right? So you say you just bought a homestead, which just pure, it's just land. You're going to build something. That's great because you can build it to your specs as to what you want. You get a really good understanding of how your house is set up, the heating system, and be able to set that up from sort of the ground up. And there's a lot of great resources out there for picking the right stove and whichever one is going to be best for that space. The second scenario is that you get a house that has a fireplace in it, or worse yet, you have a house that has a fireplace in it you've never used before, but that oil bill is getting pretty expensive, so why not dust that thing off and give it a shot? And that's where people can really run into trouble. One of the side substances of firewood is creosote, which coats the interior of a chimney, and that's really flammable stuff, and it's hard to put out. So definitely recommend, before you use that fireplace, and do it every year, honestly, because it's just good maintenance, have a professional chimney sweep come and inspect it and make sure that the chimney's clean and everything else like that. And once you have that set up, that's good. You want to make sure that you have a place where you can properly season the firewood. That's somewhat near to your house. Like keep it stacked. Get some 2x4s and have it off the ground an inch or two. So you're getting some air flow underneath it. A lot of times people will just sort of stack it, like throw it in a pile and just leave it there and pull stuff off. Well, it's going to make the seasoning of it make it kind of season oddly, because it's not getting the same amount of ventilation for all of it. So it can be kind of inconsistent. And it's also kind of hard once the snow falls to be able to pulling stuff off the plywood. There are things called Holzhausens where people will make it in sort of a house looking shape. That's a great way of doing it. As long as you're sort of stacking it and you get a little bit of space underneath, just so it's being ventilated properly and it's seasoning well. And that brings me to kind of like seasoning the firewood, right? So typically you want to use hardwood. I know there's a lot of people, especially in the south. I live in North Carolina, down by Fort Bragg, for a number of years, and you get a lot of southern pines. You get a lot of stuff, especially that comes down in the storms. Again, a lot of creosote that's created when you burn that. It burns hot but very, very fast. I think it's good like fire starter. You can kind of mix it in, but I wouldn't use that exclusively by any means. So you want to make sure that the wood is properly seasoned before you do it, because again, with using wet wood, wood that hasn't been seasoned, that hasn't had time to dry out, the ideal moisture is going to be somewhere around 15 to 20%. You can get a moisture meter out there on Amazon or wherever your local hardware store, pretty cheap. It kind of looks like two prongs. You stick it in there, and you can test the moisture just automatically. So 15, 20% or so is ideal moisture. Anything much wetter than that, like I said, it's going to have a lot of smoke, a lot of creosote, a lot of stuff that's going to mess up your chimney. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. One is to season it, stack it, sort of set it aside, let heat and nature do its work. Usually about a season, a year or so is kind of a good rule of thumb. It depends on the type of wood and sort of how long it's been there, where you got it from and everything else. A lot of different variables there. But again, having a good moisture meter will tell you, hey, no kidding, what is it currently? There's wood kilns that are out there. A lot of people who are doing, doing it professionally, semi-professionally, selling the stuff will use kilns, because you can turn that into about a week or so for a seasoning process. So you can push a lot more stuff through. Yeah. We got a great company called iDry up here in Vermont that makes some awesome kilns like that. So there's that option, or the seasoning option, doing it stacked. The third option, which is kind of a little trick to make that go a lot faster, what we do in the springtime. Okay, so usually around the time people are out sugaring maple trees, maybe a little bit of snow on the ground, sort of getting to be around that February, March time frame. Just go out scouting, because a lot of stuff has come down in the wintertime with the ice storms and snow and wind and everything else. You'll find a lot of stuff that's come down, and have the root bulb attached to it. So when you're going out and looking at the property, looking at, first of all, typically just windfall trees will be enough to keep you in firewood as much as you want. The other portion of that we can kind of get to is the active managing of the property itself, and taking down trees to give the trees themselves enough space so they can develop a full crown and grow to their full potential. So you want to do that. But whether you're taking it down a windfall tree or whether you're actively felling a tree, I would highly recommend doing it, in sort of that February, Marchish timeframe. One, there's no bugs out there. It's rather temperate, especially in the South, right?
Snakes and poison ivy.
Yeah, exactly. Poison oak, all that kind of stuff. That's one of the benefits of the hauler too. We had a guy in Australia who brought that up to us. He's like, I really like about this thing is it puts like this much space, between my hand and whoever's looking in the tall grass.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
That's
a great point. But anyway, yeah. So, but the benefit of felling it that way is that what will happen is that once you've cut it off from the root bulb, okay, it's not able to take nutrients and water, especially out of the ground. But it will, Mother Nature will still take her course, and the bulbs will, the leaf bulbs will come out, the leaves will sprout, and what that'll do is it'll draw moisture out of the log itself, right? And so that'll pull it out until there's just no more moisture really there. So that will help accelerate. Maybe not so that you actually use it that same season, but it'll definitely help accelerate that process. So then just like leave it there on the ground as a full log to run that process, and then you come back in the fall like what we would do, and then find those things or find those logs that you cut down, and then buck them up and process them from there. So that's kind of like that's sort of the overview. We can talk more about like land management and stuff like that if you want to, but.
Yeah, let's do that, because
Sure.
that's something that a number of people have expressed that they want to know more about, is how to manage a property, and what should you look for? Should you go and start identifying trees that have the wind has knocked them down,
Mhm.
and how to assess some of those things, and as
Mhm.
far as even selective harvesting?
Mhm.
Because I also want to address that there's some people who have the false idea that you can't cut down any trees, and that no, all trees need to stay up, no one needs to cut it down. One of the things that Joel Salatin says that I really like is he says we need more forests with fewer trees. I'm like, wow, that's so profound.
And my other favorite quote of him, I'm glad you didn't beat me to it, is management by abandonment is not a great solution.
Yes, I like that one too.
And it's like it's so true. Yeah, it's so true, right? Because like when you think about it, what happens in a natural like forest, right? What is God's way of clearing the dead wood? Well, hey, a lightning strike happens,
Mhm.
and then it burns down all the kind of the sickly dead wood. That can take out some of the larger trees, but it's going to clear that out. What's the problem that we have? Well, we've built houses amongst those trees and everything else, right? So if there were no people there, the animals run off, and who cares, right? But for those of us who are living in rural areas, it's important, and that's a big part of people don't they see wildland firefighters doing actually fighting the fires and stuff in the summertime, but a lot of the time that those guys and gals spend is doing vegetation mitigation type work, cutting fire breaks and doing a lot of that kind of work. That out there in the woods to try to clear those areas that just get overgrown, both through governmental policy failures of wanting to be too hands off, versus allowing some of these timber companies which can go in and selectively pick trees and actually manage it. I mean, there's a whole art and science behind this that they teach in a variety of different schools that really have come a long way. I think people sort of have the wrong idea that, okay, you're gonna bring loggers in, they're just gonna Fern Gully style just strip cut the entire thing, and that's just not the case, because no one wants to see that, because it destroys the forest, and that's not a good business model, even if you were just to look at it that way, right? So what you want is a regenerative forest that's gonna be clear and well managed, and that's a better habitat for animals. It's going to be a better tree outcomes from that. You can have selecting these larger trees that are going to grow and sequester more carbon and provide more oxygen and be better potential for these trees in general. That's one of the things that I was going to sort of start off my last spiel with saying is, If you do decide, you buy a homestead and you do decide you want to heat with firewood, good on you. First of all, because you're first of all understanding your property, understanding the trees and the woods around you in a way that I find to be revitalizing. And I think that the first step is to sort of walk through there and assess what you have for trees, okay, and what the terrain looks like. And okay, so where would I want to put an access route? How am I going to get these trees out of here? Because those are sort of the questions you have to start asking, right? Because you don't necessarily. Some people will be like, "Oh, well, I'll start at the end of the yard, just sort of work my way out," right? And it's maybe not the best plan. So getting a sense of the lay of the land and how you would maneuver a tractor and a trailer and stuff to get that. That's a good idea. The other thing that you can do is sort of once you've got a sense of what you have there, and there's a lot of great apps for your phone that you can just hold up and it will tell you exactly this. If you don't want to walk around with a little book, you can figure out exactly what the species is, what the subspecies is. Figure out how old the thing is, how tall it is. Like it's crazy what you can do with a smartphone nowadays. But you can also enlist the help of a professional forester. If you're especially in a rural area, your local town hall probably has a few of them on call that you could work with. Local universities. We've worked with like Paul Smith's College, which is a forestry school in New York before. University of Maine, Fort Kent. It's a whole bunch of different these different colleges that are out there that have future foresters, right? And they have professors who want to teach future foresters how to do this kind of survey work and understand look at what kind of trees are there. And so you can engage. I'd suggest if you want to do that kind of on the cheap, you got some time on your hands. You want to help engage the next generation of foresters, reach out to some of those colleges and see if they'd be willing to come and help you do a survey of what kind of trees do you have. Because you may be surprised, there may be some, so in the case of like cherry trees, which we had on our property, just use this as an example. So we moved to Vermont back in the 90s, we had, on about 17 acres or so. So good woodlot to manage. We had a bunch of like great cherry trees that were there that we worked with a forester to assess like, hey, this is, what this one's worth and that one's worth. And if you have enough, and there's other, obvious species like that are out there, but you may have several thousand, tens of thousands, however, much worth of lumber that's actually there as potential. And so it's that serves a couple of purposes, right? So if you're able to selectively take out some of those large, high potential trees, right? One, it's going to free up some space. Two, when they come in there, they're going to cut their own trail around your property, which of course you can dictate as to where it goes, which now provides you with access, which we still use. We just keep it clear. Provides you with an access route that nicely snakes around your property for harvesting trees. And then, turn the proceeds of that into buying things like a tractor, like a good splitter, like a good chainsaw, like a LogOX, like, all these other things that you want to get. So it can be kind of a win-win if you're blessed to have, that kind of a resource on your property. If nothing else, that survey will tell you, hey, these are kind of the stands of the different types of trees. Like, hey, you've got a maple stand here. Hey, you've got a bunch of ash trees here. We assess that, that there may be some emerald ash borer damage here. Or you could do this kind of, and you could treat these other trees. To prevent that. There's a whole variety of different things you could learn about your woods and your forest and your woodlot that could be very useful for you as somebody who's trying to manage that, to actively manage it. So that would be sort of like if I just landed in a new homestead and was looking around doing that assessment. First, I go out and look at it myself, but then also enlist the help of professionals and then just figure out what we had there, and then from there, go about assembling the right gear, which we can talk about too if you want. And getting at it.
That's great advice as far as getting a surveyor. That's really great. So let me make sure I understand. After you have someone do a survey and assess the different woods that you have, how do you get to that where you're actually selling some of those? So like you talked about the cherry and some of those more valuable woods. How do you go about actually selling those once the surveyor has identified that?
Yeah, so usually working with like a forester who's got those kind of contacts.
Okay.
And they can, and with the internet nowadays, you could be selling it all over the place. And then a lot of people out there who are doing sawmill services too, a lot more than there used to be. One of the things that we sell on our website is the Granberg International Alaskan Mill. which turns anybody's chainsaw. You swap out, use a ripping chain, and you're basically turning your chainsaw into a portable sawmill that you can bring with you. And a lot of people have turned that into a side hustle / full time job, really. So there's a lot more of the potential for that these days. And that forester can help get you a sense of what those trees might be worth, and then negotiate with a company that logging company or somebody along those lines to remove it. And then it's kind of a process. But if you do happen to have that kind of a resource on your property, it can be quite lucrative. And like I said, it also the extra benefit of that is that you now have a nice route that's cut through the other woods, so that you can have an access route for your firewood later.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
It's a technique, and some people like doing it themselves too, right? So if you really you really want to go all the way with the homesteading, hey, get yourself an Alaskan mill or bandsaw mill. It depends how I think the Alaskan mill is the kind of the gateway into it. And what's nice about it is you can take it anywhere with you, right? You don't have to move a bandsaw mill. You can really do it right where it stands. You could do it yourself, and then people are making killing on Etsy with some of these live edge slabs they're doing.
Yeah.
That may be another way. You just do it yourself and sell the live edge slabs on Etsy or something, depending on how you want to go about doing it.
Yeah.
You got to season those too, by the way. You got to make sure you season those boards when you do that too. So there's a whole process there, but it depends on how hands-on you want to be. I mean, it's with the internet and the amount of information that's out there. You're really just limited by your imagination as to what you want to do with managing your property.
So say you do want to take that step and you're like, I'm going to do it myself. I don't necessarily need a surveyor or whatever. Or maybe you had the surveyor come out and identified. What would you say is the next step as far as selectively harvesting what the woods, and as far as maybe looking at keeping some of the taller, straighter ones and that are able to branch out and get rid of some of the straggly, undesirable trees? Is that what some of the things you'd recommend?
Well, it kind of depends on what your goal is, right? So like we'll use the firewood aspect. So the first, if I was like looking at the area, right? So assessing what I could get to, because it's one thing to cut it down. It's another thing. Well, okay, it's going to last a year, maybe two, depending on how far off the ground it is. After that, it's going to rot and you're not going to be able to use it. So you're going to want to make sure that you can have access to whatever that log is that you're either felling or or has already come down as windfall, because you don't want to waste your time bucking it up or whatever if you can't get to it. So you want to kind of plan out your route, right? So in the Army, you're doing like land navigation. The people who hey, here's 5 points, here's a map, here's a protractor and a compass. Go figure out where these things are. Go out and find the points. Come back. Do it as fast as you can. And the people who would rush really fast to plot their points on the map and then go running out in the woods. Well, they got out there quickly, but they're going to spend a lot of time, trying to find those points, and chances are they're going to get lost because they plotted it incorrectly. So, the old was it Lincoln adage? Give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend 5 hours sharpening my axe. A little bit of preparation and time spent kind of strategically figuring out how you want to get and move around your woodlot, what kind of terrain you're going to be taking all that into account. What I would start off with is probably just the wind-felled trees, because the clock is already ticking on those. And that like I said, the majority of what we do is just wind-felled trees. It keeps us in. We go through four. My parents go 4 or 5 cord of wood. Every year, right? And there's plenty there, and more so. Stuff still rots on the ground, just from wind-fell stuff. After that, that also there's let's figure out, depending on the types of different trees where it is, looking at the size of the crowns, because different trees have different size crowns, meaning the leaf structure. Trying to cut down some of the smaller stuff, and some of that stuff can be done with like a bush hog, right? So some of the smaller saplings that are drawing water, competing for water and minerals from the soil from some of the larger trees that are already more established, and that's kind of a judgment call as to what you're trying to accomplish there, but. Getting a good bush hog or just using your chainsaw, it takes a little longer. It's a little more awkward, but a good bush hog, which just sort of looks like a long handle with like a circular saw at the end of it, and taking down those 1-2 inch saplings that are just overcrowding the area is a good place to start as well. And then from that you can bunch those all together and make kind of little piles of them. And I saw one of the questions that you had was like, hey, what do you do with the stumps? How do you get rid of those? Usually you don't. Usually in the woods you just kind of leave them there.
Yeah.
When arborists take down a tree, they have a thing called a stump grinder that literally just comes over and it spins in a circle and it just grinds it down, and then they put dirt and stuff over it, and that's it. But a way you could do it is you could pile up the dead brush, give it a year or two. Either leave it there as a nice habitat for small creatures, or you could pile it up and you could burn it, and with that you burn the stump, and so there's that. If you want to, like, say you want to get it out of your path or something, like it was blocking a path you want to cut. So there's a variety of that. That's sort of like the firewood side of things, right? And like I said, most of this stuff is going to be windfell trees, and sometimes the windfell trees you assess that, hey, this has a lot of board potential, especially if it's not really large enough for some liveage stuff. Maybe it's good for some dimensional timber or something because it's nice and long and straight, like some great pieces of ash and maple, and even things as like furniture grade, like cherry and walnut. You may assess that, hey, we're just going to use this and take it in as a log. In which case, you can use like a log arch. We have a log arch on our site. There's a lot of other ones too, that are out there. Logrite makes some good ones for some of the larger stuff that's out there. You basically just attach that log arch to your tractor, and then what you'll do is it's sort of like a hook, and it just lifts it up. There's usually a winch to it, lifts it up off the ground, and then you're able to just bring that all in at once. Or if you have, like I said, if you have an Alaskan mill or something, you could mill it right there on the ground. But using a log arch, you can move the entire log, because obviously you're not going to cut it up into pieces, because you want the entire log. So,
Hold on. Speaking of equipment, especially for like a beginner, what would you recommend as far as what equipment should be and tools should be purchased versus what should be rented for someone who's not necessarily doing it on I guess a more professional level, on a more beginner homesteader level?
I'd say like the log splitter can probably be rented. Stuff that's machinery like that, like a tractor, that kind of stuff. The stuff that's going to be used a few times. That like you get a good splitter over a weekend, right? And get your friends and family together and do a good splitting, and that's that. That tractor, something that get trailer, stuff like that to be able to move the things. That's what I'd start off with renting. The stuff I wouldn't rent would be like a chainsaw. I don't know. It just to me, it's like, hey, that's your own. I don't know. Like I wouldn't want somebody else's rifle at it. I would want my own chainsaw, right? Because you're taking care of it, you're maintaining it. The ins and outs of it. I'd start with like a 16 to 18-inch bar, which is reasonable, but not too long, so it's going to be unwieldy. Of something quality, steel, Husqvarna, Echo, some of the good quality stuff that's out there. Avoid the cheap crap that's imported, as tempting as that may be. And also make sure it has a good chain with it, and keep it, well maintained, like anything else.
Is there a particular brand you like more than the other?
It's a personal preference. It's kind of a Chevy Ford kind of thing, man. But like I said, a good quality brand of steel, Husqvarna, Echo makes some good stuff now. They've really come a long way. But there's some other brands out there too that do well. Poolin, so it's really just comes down to personal preference. So if like steel has they sell through a dealership kind of network, right? Like, so if you live in an area that doesn't necessarily have a steel dealer there that you can buy one from and get it serviced at, you may want to opt for like a Husqvarna that anybody can fix or something. So like there's different reasons.
Yeah.
So
Now, I'm assuming gas, not electric, right?
Yeah, use gas. Yeah, no, and that's again personal preference, but that's what I would go with, and make sure you got your bar oil that you bring out with you. Make sure you got your scrench, so if you need to change change your chain out in the field, bring an extra one of those. Maybe another bar. Have your PPE. Chainsaw chaps are an absolute must. Protective shoes are good as well. John ran into an issue with that. He's got a chainsaw chap with a nice big scar across the leg that really could have hemmed him up. So definitely have chains. Even if you're just out there doing it quick, doing something quick, having those can be a real difference and a lifesaver. Have a good first aid kit, tourniquet, know how to use it. Those are the kind of things, especially if you're out there working alone in the woods, that you want to have that could save your life. Then of course a good helmet, visor, your eyes, ears. You want to always keep that. Good set of gloves. Some bug spray. You would definitely want to have some good bug spray. And then of course, I'd be remiss without saying, hey, have a LogOX with you, because that's what we did. Was we took all the tools that you would want, all the hand tools you want to be able to lift, roll, pick up with a timberjack, buck up. You can use the timberjack to drag logs. You can use the hauler to grab not only round pieces of wood. You can use it to grab branches, like those 3-4 inch size branches that are a pain to try to tuck under an arm and drag. Well, you can use the handle of that hauler to drag those, and you're really going to save yourself a lot of time and wear and tear on your back. And we created a bag called the LogOX that we sell, which has room in it. It has 2 large internal pockets, so you can put your scrunch, PP, chains, extra stuff like that into that. The small stuff, put your LogOX, and then there's like a lot of room for some other stuff too. But I like to lay my chainsaw chaps on top of it, so it kind of becomes padded, right? And as you know, you get the longer handle, so you can wear it over your back. So when you're walking around doing some scouting, you've got it on your back and just carry it. And now you got your chainsaw in one hand, literally everything you need to handle the logs as efficiently as possible on your back, and then all your PPE, and you're good to go.
I definitely would echo you on a number of those things you said, because with most things here on our homestead, we started off the hard way. So I started with borrowing a chainsaw, which I do not recommend. Most part, if you got a lot to do, just go ahead and get you one if you can. And then things like having the face shield. You don't want to be cutting the tree up and then you're getting stuff in your eyes, and that's just dangerous.
Yeah, it hurts.
So,
No, I mean, you see people like, some people like, oh, well, I'll just wear, safety glasses or wear the bug eyes or something like that. I mean, I tell you, you catch a few chips in the face,
you do.
1,500 RPMs or whatever, it really, it can really sting. So you definitely want to try to avoid that.
And one of the things that I can't help but think about, I've never used as far as extensively in one of those battery powered chainsaws. I just imagine what happens if you get in the middle of a project and the battery runs dead and you're like, oh no.
Your bar is like pinched or something in the middle of it. Yeah,
that'd be terrible.
I don't know. Swapping a fresh battery pack or something. I don't know.
I hope you have one.
I guess so. Yeah. I don't mess with those, but I'm sure some people like them.
I've heard the gas ones.
Yeah.
Oh, so as far as you mentioned a couple trees, as far as being profitable trees, what would be some of the trees you kind of touched on a little bit, as far as the best and fastest growing trees for firewood, and also some of the best trees that you would recommend for like milled wood?
Cool. Yeah. No, absolutely. Do we have that chart? Like we can pop up and we could talk BTUs, British thermal units.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Awesome. So this is something the University of Illinois Extension put together, and it's a little small here, but hopefully you guys at home can see it. So basically, we're looking at the first column here is millions of BTUs per cord. So BTUs of British thermal units is essentially how much heat it's going to put out. So different species of firewood, hardwood, put out different amounts of heat. The second thing is sort of the spark characteristics, whether this is going to be something that's going to spark a lot. Not that usually that big of a deal, but it's throwing a bunch of sparks up your chimney could be something to consider. And then the ease of starting. So it kind of goes difficult, moderate, easy, the EMD there. As you can see, it really is going to kind of depend on what you have around your property, right? It kind of goes without saying that's going to dictate a lot of that. The oak, that's going to burn really hot for a long time. It's harder to start. But like I said, if you've got a good starter, like fat wood or something like that, which you can make your own fat wood just using some pine or something like that, that's going to start easily. That'll burn just fine. Or adding it to a mix of things like birch, for instance. Birch is going to burn quickly and very easily, and it'll get very hot. And with that, you can just add some oak to it and start, adding that to it. So maybe you start off with one species, and then you just add some of this stuff that's going to burn hotter for longer as you go into the night, right? So, and that was one of the reasons why we came up with the hearth bin. Not to throw another plug in here, but basically, we would always set up our firewood, on the floor, on the ground next to the fireplace, and 3 or so in the morning, the fire starts to go out. You got to start throwing firewood in there. The problem that we had is we have like a narrow, folks house had a narrow 8-inch hearth in front of the fireplace, and all the hearth, bins, firewood racks, stuff like that out there are fixed dimensional. So we couldn't really find something that would fit on it, and it's it just got kind of messy to be putting all this firewood on the carpet next to the stove and the bottom. So that's when John was like, well, hey, what if we just created the hearth bin, which has 2 adjustable side panels. And with that, you're able to have one panel, back flush with the wall behind it, and then load it up with firewood, and the other panel kind of goes out into the room just slightly. And you can put, definitely a night's worth or day and night's worth of firewood in there, and have that to feed it. So yeah, my recommendation to make your life easier is to start off with one of these woods that are easier to start with. Get it going, get a good fire going, and then just feed it oak, feed it that maple. That's going to put out a lot of good BTUs through the evening, and then maybe just lay off a little bit during the daytime or whenever else, but just keep it going. And that's kind of the key. Is as long as you've got something smoldering, something in there that's staying going, you can ramp it up or sort of tone it down based on how much you're actually feeding into it. And when you harvest this stuff, it's going to turn into sort of a variety of different types that are going to sit on your wood pile. So you can kind of pick and choose a little bit, but starting off with some birch or something like that, make it easier on yourself.
Kind of backtrack a little bit. We talked about managing the land and harvesting wood. Well, but we didn't necessarily dig deeper as far as what are some of the benefits of having a property with woods that is managed correctly. One of the things that stands out to me is just as I've been out there working, as far as you're able to identify trees that aren't healthy and that could be possible dangers for widowmakers and things like that.
Yeah.
To keep out for. But what would you say are some of the benefits to the land and to your functionality and as moving around the property from just a human perspective?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I really feel strongly, that we're called to be good stewards of God's kingdom, right? And that's the land that you have, that you've been blessed with, and that's your job to go out there and manage. We don't want management by abandonment, right? So you bring up a good point about, the widowmakers that can happen. And for folks who don't know, a widowmaker usually happens when you've got some disease to a tree, or it gets struck by lightning, and they're sometimes hard to decipher. But what happens is as you're felling a tree, somewhere up the length of the tree, there's a dead spot that the top of the tree will then come back and break off, especially as it's starting to fall. And that can create, you've basically set up, hey, it's going to fall this way based on what it looks like from the ground. But because this is a diseased tree, we didn't really kind of catch it early enough, whatever, it can happen. It can happen. I mean, it can happen anytime. But, you wind up having, they call barber chair trees, where kind of, barber chairs where it kind of like breaks back off of it as it's going forward, and part of it snaps back. And that's why, again, it goes back to being, what I find with it is that having a first of all, a primary and a secondary, maybe a tertiary egress route of, we call oh crap azimuth, right? Of what happens if, as you're continuing to look up. So as you're going, feel what your saw is like. What is your saw telling you? What kind of vibrations are you getting? What are you hearing as you look up? Are you hearing some creaking above you? Maybe stop, back off, and take a second. There's no one needs to rush through, regardless of whether you're doing this professionally or on your own. No one needs to rush through felling a tree. That's one of the most dangerous things you can possibly do, is being out there with your chainsaw trying to take down a tree. And again, that's why a lot of the stuff we use just wind fell. It's just a lot safer. It's a lot easier to do. You got to watch even with that. Sometimes you have a root bulb, you get thousands of pounds worth of pressure that's going one direction with the weight of the dirt that's still attached to that root bulb pulling it, and then the rest of the tree going the other way. So you got to watch out for that, of it just sort of breaking loose on you and coming up. But so there's those kinds of dangers. I mean, it is a dangerous activity that's made safer by people doing it thoughtfully, with the right PPE, and doing it carefully. But yeah, so to go back to your point, having that egress route and paying attention as you're in the process of taking down a tree will make that a lot safer for you. And I think that the overall benefit of it is, like we talked a little bit earlier about fire mitigation, about the trees being healthier, about it being a better habitat for animals to move, especially larger animals. Like if you're trying to propagate deer or elk, or depending on where you are, those larger animals can move more freely through your property. There's going to be a lot more grass area that's going to sprout up as a result of that. Okay, like and so that creates more feeding habitats and potential for those animals. And it just creates you want diversity within the ecosystem of whatever the forest is, right? And so if it's just an overgrown swamp, and it's all a bunch of wait a minute vines and brambles and thickets and stuff that you haven't managed at all, you're not gonna have those sort of larger animals able to thrive there along with the smaller animals and everything else. That should be in a good forest ecology. So there's a variety of different benefits of that, and you'll see photos of managed properties versus or managed, especially that forests that are professionally managed and very well set up. You look at like an area that's burnt out, like right next to where the fire just kind of comes through and it burns off some of the grassland in the area, but the trees, the larger trees are they're singed, but they're kind of left untouched for the most part, and they bounce right back, and so you're not having an entire forest get wiped out. As everything continues to just smolder on the smaller stuff that's at their roots and kills those trees, because it just sort of goes right through if it does at all.
I never thought about that visual comparison between woods that has gotten burned up and left the stronger trees versus ones that has been managed properly. As far as the spacing, is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
So
and you'll see it like and like I used to in at Fort. Basically, military bases do a pretty good job with this. So I was at Fort Bragg. In the springtime, you'd always smell pine burning, and that's because they're doing a lot of controlled burns. And you'd be like driving along, like looks like the whole forest is on fire. So they go, now they're just burning off that pine straw and like some of the smaller stuff, and you'd see scorch marks on these southern pine trees, but they were just fine. It's just managing it, and you don't need to be doing controlled burns on your property, getting all crazy with it and stuff, but. But by managing it, you're reaping the harvest of those down trees that otherwise would just kind of rot away on the ground, and you're using that to heat your house and be more independent as a result of that. So I think there's a lot of benefits to doing that and to living that kind of lifestyle. Like I said before at the beginning of this, is that you're more connected with the land, and to me, I've always found that to be incredibly enjoyable.
Yeah, the more I'm out there, the more I enjoy it, and the more you're able to learn and identify things. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
One of the things, what would you suggest as far as managing after you're dropping trees, like handling the brush and things like that? We've done several different ways as far as using some of it for kindling, and then some of it we have done smaller controlled brush fires, and you can acquire fire permits to do those things, or burn permits.
Sure.
So what would you suggest along those lines?
Yeah, no, it kind of depends on what you want to do with the kind of the area that you're in, right? So if it's an area that you're trying to clean up for maybe growing a lawn or something you want to do that area, I typically just leave the branches where they are if I'm like deep out in the woods, because they'll just rot, and they'll just provide nutrients for the soil, and like that's fine. Sometimes what we'll do is you want to take them to a central location, kind of bind them, get them together all going in one direction, and I'll use the hook of the hauler and sort of lock that in, and then I'll drag it, and it kind of creates like a sled-like effect where they're all sort of riding on top of the larger couple of branches I've made the base of it. So kind of start with a couple of larger branches, usually like coniferous if you can find them, if that's what you're working with, right? And then sort of interlock those two, and then you can just add some of the smaller branches on it, and then I just use my hauler to drag that over to wherever I want it to go, and pile it up. And sometimes like I'll do that for just to create habitat. Make kind of if there's like a fallen tree, make kind of like a little bit of like a little lean-to like that. Just create some habitat for the smaller creatures that are out there, rabbits, stuff like that'll add to the ecodiversity that's in the forest. Because hey, why not? I used to do that with fishing, right? You just drag some branches out there and like some good bass habitats, right? So you can do the same. You can do the same thing. Grouse love it, birds, all that kind of smaller stuff that adds to the ecodiversity of the area. You can burn it. You can burn it in place, like you alluded to. Some of the small stuff. There's a lot of good firewood in it, and so that's where the WoodLoX sling, which I talked about a little bit earlier, comes in handy. When you're talking, that 2-3 inch, uh, rounds that are out there, yeah, it's a little bit small to kind of deal with. But there's a lot of good BTUs that are in there. So if you get your WoodOX sling with you, just go and pick up a bunch, fill that whole thing up, and now you've got a lot of good kindling. Fire starters. It's just like better than just leaving it on the ground. Especially if you don't have that much of it to begin with. If you're trying to get the most out of that tree, use your chainsaw and buck up a bunch of those sort of smaller rounds, and then use your sling to kind of gather them all up and take one trip over to your wagon and dump it in there. And usually make kind of a separate side pile for that sort of stuff, and you can grab a few of those as a fire starter or whatever. So there's a lot of different stuff you can do with it.
We've touched on throughout the talk as far as different ideas of people to make little micro businesses. Are there any other businesses that you have seen from others that have created businesses, or just little income sources, various income sources, just from dealing with various woods on their property? Are there any others that's come to your mind?
You'd be surprised, what a cord of firewood's selling depending on where you are. And there's a lot of people who just from the ground up. I was on the Woodhounds podcast, which a couple of guys who run it, and it's a firewood. They a couple of guys who started just doing it themselves and are now in Ohio and Michigan respectively. They got their own YouTube channels. Selling a pretty good amount of it, and they've really upped their game in terms of what they now have for firewood processors and everything else. But they started small, just selling it. And so, if you're really willing to put in the sweat equity, there's a lot of potential there for selling campfire wood. Get a bundler. Go to like the local grocery store and see what campfire wood's selling for. You can buy a bundler where you basically, it looks like sort of a circle, and then you wrap it with cellophane, and then you're selling it for like $10 for just like 5-6 sticks of wood, right? And think of how many of those you could turn out of a cord. So there's a lot of different potential out there for actually selling firewood, and depending on the market you're in. So there are people out there who certainly do that and make some good money off of that, and that's a whole nother realm. And then there are folks like me who, me and my family who've taken taken a product or taken a pain point and created a product around that to address that, and then gone through the process of patenting it, finding a manufacturing partner, setting up an e-commerce website, selling it on there, going to different shows like Homesteaders of America, Paul Bunyan show. Do a lot of Mother Earth News shows, which is great because we get a chance to meet people and get feedback on our products and grow from there. So there's that, and there's also people who are coming up with books and sort of informational type products that are out there. People who have YouTube channels around it, some very successful YouTube channels that are out there, like GP Outdoors, which is just a retiree up in Canada who loves doing firewood and has really built a channel, or like yours, where that's just a part of what you have on your channel that you're able to monetize and use, which is also great about the internet and the potential there. But I sent over, and we could talk about it a little bit to provide folks with a framework if we got some time here. The design thinking framework, and so we can take a look at that real quick. So this is basically design thinking in a nutshell, and this has kind of evolved over the past 100 years. It was coined design thinking by a couple of guys in the 90s, but essentially what it is it's a human centric development model that is pretty intuitive when you think about it, that you can use to take whatever niche that you're in. It doesn't have to be firewood. It can be any sort of niche that you're in that you like doing, preferably something that you like doing, because you want to build a business that you want to be in, and because it's going to provide you with the inspiration to keep doing it when anybody else who was sane would have stopped a long time ago. But so the first step is really to empathize with the people who have whatever the issue is, and you don't necessarily have to be doing it yourself, but it certainly helps. Because you know what firsthand what those pain points are. So it comes down to conducting that research in the area that you're in, and empathizing with what the actual problem is. And so for us, it was that the problem is, hey, my back is killing me at the end of the day, because I'm doing harvesting firewood. What is really at the heart of that? And so that kind of goes in the next step of define, which falls under sort of the understanding phase of like, okay, well, the reason my back is killing me is because I continue to bend over. and just continually, and I'm having to put these rounds onto the splitter, but there's no other way to do it. So that feeds into, okay, let's the ideation phase, which is, okay, well, what are some crazy ways that we could change this? What are the different tools that are out there? How are people maybe going about this in a different way? How could we figure out a way to do this better? And in that phase, throughout a whole range of ideas, that's kind of the brainstorming phase. That's doing research online, watching YouTube videos, looking for people with similar takes on whatever that problem is, and seeing how other people are out there doing it. And then from there, it's like, hey, well, the hardest part is how do we prototype a solution for that? Because those first three steps, definitely the first two, fairly easy to do. The next step is how do we develop a prototype of something that could actually work? And it might be a physical prototype. In our case, it was a tool that we developed and designed to tackle those pain points. It could be a lack of understanding that hey, the pain point is that people don't really know how to manage their property, and that there's just a lack of knowledge that's out there. So let's develop a course, and we'll figure out different ways of pushing that course out there and different platforms to have it on, things of that nature. So this can be a sort of idea based product or service, and then from there it's testing it, getting a small group of people who are testing, who are knowledgeable about the arena. We've definitely provided our products to folks like you, to arborists, to people who are doing a lot of this kind of stuff, and get it out there. And then, on the flip side of that too, is that once you have a final product, those same people, especially if they have YouTube channels or other sources of social media, can help you with the initial launch of that, whatever the product or service or idea is, that they help provide feedback on. And, it's sort of that phase of the testing prototype kind of work hand in hand, because you're constantly going to be tweaking that prototype based on what's coming back from the test results. And of course, you're going to be using it as well, which is what we've done. In 2022, we came up with 5 different upgrades to the product that we had, and what it came back to is that we had feedback from different people who had been using it in the field. We had our own feedback. We had customer reviews. We had snarky YouTube comments. We had all sorts of just different stuff that we took all these different points and really empathized with it and said, okay, hey, is there merit to this? Is this something that we can change? Okay, and so we went back through the same process. I'll just go through it real quickly. So the handle, like, can we make this a little bit longer to get more leverage to it? We found that 40 inches still fits in the bag. The diameter still works, so that that you can have the hauler be the same diameter, so that the hauler doesn't get too heavy. So we found 40 inches was a sweet spot. So we elongated to a full 40 inch, like industry standard medium sized can hook. The hauler handle, people with big mitts, were having some problems that kind of running to the edge of it. So we added an extra ½ inch to it. People with gloves. So now the wooden handle on the haulers is wider. The pins, people didn't like the fact that there was a hairpin and a clevis pin. There were 2 different parts, and that was a long and exhaustive search. And we found the new swing lock hitch pin, or swing lock connection pin, okay, which basically it goes in and it's one part and it locks in place. You can see it on our website. We did a video on this that goes over all this stuff. And then also we had a bunch of people wanting they wanted new hooks, and so the hook, basically we're like, why do you need a new hook? It's like, well, because when I was using the timberjack, I struck it with my chainsaw. And so the initial feedback's like, okay, don't do that. It's like, it's okay. But then we thought about it. It's like, well, hey, it was initially black, and that kind of blends in with the bark. It's either low light condition, you might not see it, and people, vision. So we're like, hey, let's just make it orange and make it as high vis orange like the rest of it, right? Pretty simple change, but it was not something that we assessed it. And then the final thing was the timberjack. So we had people complain that, hey, we made our timberjack look basically like everybody else's, because it was, I wasn't saying it's an afterthought, but it was kind of like, well, hey, let's not reinvent the wheel here when we first rolled it out. So it was tubular steel. And so what the problem with that was that, soft soil, it would sink into the ground, and it sort of performed like anybody else's timberjack. And so that wasn't good enough for us. So what we decided to do was create the Bigfoot timberjack, which I'm one of the co-patentees on that. We got that patent pending, where we created like kind of a skid plate. It's a flat skid plate, three times more ground connectivity than the previous one, and it also has sort of a it tips up on the front, kind of like a ski tip. So you can use it more like a skidder. So it's flat. The geometry of it's such that is when it is flat, the back of it, the handle is flat, flush to the ground. Okay, creating a perfect angle. So it becomes a lot more stable that way than other timber jacks that are out there, and it's also not going to sink into the ground as easily. And it's also easier to take it and just drag it and skid it, especially if you're working on like concrete or something like a lot of the tree crews who use this are doing. So we added those 5 different things to it, and the final step of that process is to implement, right? And we took those, we worked with our manufacturing partner to take those. We tested them all out. We went through that entire cycle again, and then we implemented that and pushed it out in 2022. We've had a lot of great feedback on that.
Well, after chatting for about an hour now about all of the cutting trees up and all that, makes me want to go out there and start doing some of it.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I know. Same here. Same here. Yeah.
But we got a number of questions that I apologize that I'm just now glancing at. So let's go through some of the ones that we just got a couple here. Yeah. And Kim asked, at what point is a fallen tree not desirable for wood for burning? Like how long or the level of decay? Should you just leave it for the ecosystem, or what should you do with the tree that? I guess first, what is the point of like not usable?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. One way to figure that out would be to cut into it, right? Get your moisture meter out and figure out what the moisture is there, and then maybe buck it up into a couple of sections and roll it over. If it looks like it's starting to decay, there's sort of a sponginess to the bottom of it. What does it look like on the inside of it after you've bucked it and cut into it? You can tell fairly quickly whether or not that's going to be usable wood. If it's got kind of this spongy, punky sort of texture to it, that's probably too far to be using, and it's going to retain moisture, so it's never going to fully season or dry out. It sort of depends on how bad that is. It's a judgment call based on whatever the tree is, but the best way to find out is just cut into it and see what it looks like.
And then once you decide that, oh man, this tree, once you cut it in, it's just broken down. It's got worms and things all in it. And
yeah.
What do you just say? Just leave it? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, you can. I mean, yeah, no. So it kind of depends on what the tree is doing. Like, is it blocking your path? Is it somewhere that is this your nicely manicured forest that you want completely clean? I don't know. So in that case, you could use the log arch to lift it up, or you could buck it up and just get it out of your way the same way you would. Just don't burn it, because it's not going to burn well. But it's up to you. Yeah.
Okay. Next one from Scattered Creek Homestead. If looking for a surveyor, what do we need to ask to know we have located a great company and a bad surveyor company?
Yeah, no, I mean, so a lot of, especially depends on where you are, but especially in the Northeast, there's a lot of town foresters, or people who are associated with the town directly, and you reach out to your local town hall. They may have a forester who is on station there, who they can recommend, and that forester is going to be somebody who's been professionally trained, and can put you in touch with some reputable companies that are out there. The same way you would look into any company. Better Business Bureau, stuff like that, to see their reputation, which you can do pretty easily online nowadays, as a good way of determining the right forester logging company that you want to work with. The other, like I said, the other route too is reaching out to, if you've got a local or state college that has a forestry program, to find people who can do that initial sort of site survey and give you an idea of what kind of trees you have and what sort of state they're in. Whether you have, oh wow, there's an infestation of emerald ash borer here you didn't know about. There's a lot of amazing, technology they can use. They can do a core sampling, for instance, like some of these foresters. There's a machine that's about yay big, and you put it up to the tree, and it'll drill like a small micro needle into the tree and give you a core sample, and it will read out, hey, what is the, and a lot of professional arborists have this technology. It'll read out like, hey, what is the actual health of this tree, based on is this running into any pockets of decay or things of that nature. It's really, and there's some other amazing technology that's out there that I was actually first exposed to at the TCI Expo, which is the Tree Care Industry Expo that we go to. Just some of the amazing technology that's out there. But a lot of colleges and universities that are teaching the next generation of foresters will have access to this kind of stuff. Just like Fairfield University had access to super high tech EMG technology that we use to conduct the the ergonomic impact test for the, to be able to prove the efficacy of the 3-in-1. They just have those kind of resources being schooled. So I'd reach out to that, and that can be a pretty cost-effective way of doing things. And yeah, that's how I go
Great.
about doing it.
Fantastic. Austin, thank you so much for everything you shared today. And for those who want to, first, I just want to mention that if you're looking to get the LogOX, which I highly recommend, we have left the link in the comment section here. So make sure you check that out. And you also guys also offer other great tools, but I'm a huge fan of the LogOX. And people can follow you on, you got a YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, so we're Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Big Blue LogOX. We're LogOX USA on YouTube, on LinkedIn, Pinterest, a couple of the smaller ones. And then, of course, you guys can visit us at thelogox.com. And that's where you can find us.
Fantastic. You guys offer an email newsletter or anything like that for people who want to learn more information?
We do. Yeah, no. So we have at the kind of the bottom of our page, we have a sign up, and we actually the past year we plant one tree with every order that comes through. We're working with a great NGO that does that in really deforested parts of all around the world. And so far we planted a lot of trees. And so we're going to transition that over into offering a free tree for everybody who signs up for our mailing list. But we do have a sign up right now at the bottom of our page at thelogox.com.
Fantastic. Austin, is there any final comments or anything else you want to share that you didn't get to share yet?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on. And, I think just for anybody else who's out there who wants to start a business around an idea they have, I think that it's important that, especially in this day and age, that people develop different, cash flow opportunities and turn different little side hustles and different things, different projects into something that can be a source of income and a source of inspiration. And we really, we need your ideas, and the homesteading community is, I know from talking to people at the Homesteaders of America conference and other places, is full of ideas. And I would really encourage people to look into, bringing that to the forefront and figuring out a way to share with the world whatever it is that you've come up with to make the world a better place, different products, and then make them right here in the United States, be the change you want to see. Right. So, that's what I really encourage folks, and I hope that this has been useful. And you guys can always reach out to us, customer service at thelogox.com. If there's any questions I didn't get to, or hit us up on Instagram or wherever else, and we'll try to answer those questions. But I really appreciate it, Mike.
Fantastic. Thanks, Austin, and enjoy the rest of your day. God bless.
Thanks, Mike. You too. God bless.
All right.